Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our subject today, effective marriage counseling. You know, every couple has its tough times, fights, struggles, no matter how good the relationship. So how do you know when your problems are at a point when you really need help from a marriage counselor? And how do you know when you see one that you've chosen an effective one? Today we're going to talk about that subject, and with us to delve into it is Dr. Don Ferguson, who's a psychologist who's been doing this kind of work for 30 years as a marriage counselor. He's now teaching at Edgewood College, teaching marriage counseling, and he's the author of a book by an interesting title, Reptiles in Love, and he's really not talking about animals, just animal-like humans, ending destructive fights and evolving toward more loving relationships, end quote. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here.
As I said in the open, how do you know that it's time to see a marriage counselor versus, well, you're having the ups and downs and conflicts that most couples do?
I would look for some specific markers. The tragedy of marriage work is that people typically wait about 6 years after developing problems before they actually seek help. That's what recent statistics have shown. And can you imagine the damage that's been done in that amount of time?
Can you do irreversible damage by not turning yourself in sooner?
I think you can. I think you can do damage to the degree that people reach a point of... What I hear from people that have gone too far is a feeling of numbing, where they just feel like they don't feel anything. They're not even angry anymore. It's easier to deal with anger than with numb. But even that can be turned around, but it takes more and more work as the damage is done, as the insults or the sense of betrayal stacks up. It gets harder and harder. So in some ways you want to get people to start thinking about their marriage, even if they're not seeking formal marriage therapy, but maybe going to a marriage seminar or going to a couples weekend or marriage encounter, or paying attention to the marriage in their own style.
Why are they so reluctant to go? Why does it take them 6 years?
I think quite often it's that level of intimacy, once that feels betrayed, once you feel ignored by your partner, etc., you tend to keep hoping that it'll get better. You keep putting it off. Oh, maybe things will get better after we get a promotion at work, or we start having less financial problems, or it'll get better when the kids get a little older. It'll get better when we move to another state. And so there's this sense that something's going to happen externally to make it better. And yet those external changes rarely change anything once the tension of the couple has developed.
Then I wonder if it's any different with individuals. You know, someone who's suffering from depression or anxiety, do they wait to turn themselves in?
Oh, I think so, but I think for couples it's even more complicated because two people have to make a joint decision to come in for help.
Yeah.
There's also that sense of embarrassment that, oh, if we need a marriage counselor, then we must already be in trouble. And many have stories of, we've tried to fix this and it hasn't worked. Sometimes it feels like it's made it worse. Some of them have stories having heard from a neighbor, a friend, or a relative that went through marriage counseling and things got worse instead of better. So they have a number of mythologies about the relationship and about change that may spook them a bit from seeking help.
So if they say we're going, that's saying what negative about themselves?
It could be that we're really in trouble, or we must really be bad off if we have to seek counseling.
Yeah, as a couple.
Right.
Say anything individual, like I must be a bad husband.
Right.
All of that. And you said it takes two.
It takes two.
You know, I wonder how often is one dragging the other in versus both are saying we're here for help?
It's quite frequent that one's dragging the other. And what I find with couples is that they're often out of sync. I don't think most of the couples I see, or maybe all the couples I see, it's not that one doesn't want a better marriage. They've tried things. Each has tried in their own way to make the marriage better in some small way. But they're often out of sync with each other. So that by the time one says, oh my gosh, things are so bad that I think we need help, the other one is already angry and saying, I asked you to do that for 5 years, now why? And so there's this sense of betrayal and simply not connecting on it's time for us to do something together.
I have this sense that if anyone's dragging anyone in, it's usually the woman dragging the man in. Is that correct?
It's quite often. Well, my little joke sometimes is that if the guy calls, her closet is already empty or close.
Why do you say that?
Quite often, women have asked for help along the way. They've been more responsive emotionally to the tension in the household, men will often say, I'm fixing it by working harder. I'm doing more around the house. I'm taking out the garbage without being asked. What more could you possibly be asking of me? And again, this is a stereotype, but that's typically what you hear is males will be more action-oriented and, well, we can fix this without having to talk about it.
Why is it that men tend to be so reluctant to go see a therapist with their wife?
I think there's a couple things. First of all, that they are often less verbally oriented towards fixing emotional things. They tend to want to do things, and there's been some argument, and I think that there's some truth to it, that marriage counseling traditionally has been biased against males. We tell males to do things like talk more and make eye contact and do all kinds of romantic things that may not be in their repertoire. So we're in effect saying, start speaking Swahili, and then everything will get better. And they feel quite overwhelmed by that.
Well, but wait a minute. It seems to me that a lot of these skills are pretty important in a marriage. If you're never going to talk about your feelings, or you're never going to look at your wife when you talk to her or whatever, you ought to learn these things.
Right. But couples, partners, and therapists will sometimes buy into the idea that there's one way to make connection, and that's through talking. And it's not necessarily true. Talking is ultimately going to be important. Communication is ultimately going to be important. But when you think about it, the amount of talking you do isn't going to solve your marriage. The amount of eye contact you make isn't going to solve your marriage. It's a sense of feeling connected and feeling like you've been gotten by each other. And there are thousands of ways of making connection. Men know how to pursue women. They knew from their college days, from high school, they thought about pursuing. They're not quite as good sometimes at keeping and maintaining, but they have skills for treating a woman well, a partner well, and you can elevate those as opposed to punishing them for not talking enough.
Okay, those skills of pursuing, what are they?
Paying attention, saying nice things.
Listening?
Yeah, well, it could be listening, and it could just be a sense of inviting the partner in, asking them to do things with them, telling them about your day, but also telling them what you need. One of the things that I spend a lot of time with couples is on being very specific. They may not need a 30-minute discussion or a 2-hour discussion. They may need to let their partner know that when they walk in the door, they really, really need a 10-minute shower before they discuss the pain of the day. Okay. Now, if they tell that, it's usually a no-brainer. They can do it. Nobody's hurt. If the partner has to guess, they tend to fall into this kind of, you never want to talk to me, oh, you're always jumping on me as soon as I walk in the door. And this conflict seems to start almost as soon as they walk in the door and eyeball each other, as opposed to a little bit of information, such as, I need a break. I need to sit in the driveway for 5 minutes and listen to one more song on the radio before I walk in and transition into the house. I need a shower. I need a hug. I need you to pay attention to me. Often couples guess at these kinds of things, and my belief is that if you're already stressed out, if you've got 3 kids running around your feet, and you've got a partner asking for more attention, and you've got work to be done and dinner's cooking, if you have to guess in that arena, you will always go negative. That's how our brains are prepped.
Okay, from what I'm hearing, between the lines, though, is that the men are not telling the wives or their partners what they need as much as the women are able to express it.
Actually, the wives may not be giving that much information either. The wives may also be, from another standpoint, anticipating, if he really loved me, he would come in and want to talk to me. If he really loved me, he would take one of the kids and do something and give me some time. So often, women may be doing the very same thing, maybe from a different standpoint, but not giving these minimal bits of information that could kick them into another kind of relationship.
Okay, let's back into, in comes Barbara dragging in Bill, who says, I'll go, all right, I'll go, stop pestering me. And how do you enlist Bill to be a partner or buy into this process versus sitting there being resistant?
I think men are resistant because they're not sure what's going to happen to them, and they're also kind of inured to the idea of a bunch of psychobabble being thrown at them and being told that they're being bad husbands. when I interview, I look for information for both of them about their histories, their expectations, what's going on. And then I give them a very pragmatic description of how the brain works and how the brain works when it's stressed out in a couple's
this is
problem.
for which you became famous for Reptiles in Love,
That's right.
Okay.
But then we talk about a very pragmatic approach. Now, this approach may actually be a turnoff initially to some women because it sounds very businesslike and very mechanical. But it's a way of creating a meeting ground for the two of them where they both can feel some degree of safety. So the man does not feel like he needs to learn Swahili, and the wife doesn't need to feel like she's going to be ignored or punished or whatever for this discussion. You create a degree of safety for both and respect.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and also note that you understand that they've also tried things already, that they do care about each other, that this is not about one of them being bad. Often they're coming in with an idea of badness.
When people do come in, if you had a list, the most common, second most common, third most common reason they present to you when they come in, what comes to mind?
Communication, finances, time, kids. Time may actually be higher than finances. In some statistics have shown that the higher complaint is how time is spent. And that may be time together, or it may be help with things around the house and that sort of thing.
So we're not spending enough time together.
Right.
You're never with me.
Right.
Okay. And finances is how we're spending our money?
It's very high up, and it involves all kinds of things. The problem with finances is that usually when people say we're arguing about money, they're not. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they're not even sure. So and the way you note that is when you start asking very specific questions. How much money do you feel like you have to have in the bank at the end of the month in order to feel safe? What are you saving for? Is this about retirement, or is this about kids going to college? And you start asking very detailed questions. Most of them go, I don't know. I just know she spends too much. Or I know he bought a snowblower last week, and it's, we live in Arizona, so why did he buy a snowblower?
So what is the fight really about?
The fight is really about autonomy, trust, respect, deserving things, anxiety about safety, financial safety. But unfortunately, they tend to split away from each other on this because there's several levels of discussion going on. If one partner says, oh my gosh, I'm really worried about money today, it's been on my mind all day, and the other partner says, hey, I'm trying as best I can.
Versus saying, why are you worried?
Right, exactly. In a sense, that they think they're still talking about money, but in fact they're having two very separate discussions. One's having a good partner discussion. I'm a good partner, I'm doing the best I can. The other's saying, I'm worried about money. As they split away from each other, those will turn into 15 different discussions and then 30 different discussions.
It's complicated stuff.
Yes.
You had mentioned marriage weekends, marriage seminars, and whatever. If the couple's in trouble, why not just go to a weekend and get it done with instead of seeing you for 6 months or whatever?
First of all, I typically don't see people for 6 months, but typically what they need to do, marriage seminars are great ways to get a kickstart or to renew a marriage that's actually going very well. There's a lot of pluses to marriage weekends. And what I really like about those weekends is that there's a sense of sharing where couples can actually look across the room and see another couple nodding, agreeing, and getting it, so they don't feel quite so odd or alone, as if we're the only people that have these kinds of problems. The reason that marriage therapy is critical is there has to be a practice element. I believe that people are not really just trying to be nicer to each other in marriage therapy. They're actually trying to change their brains. They're trying to create new neuronal pathways of how they respond to stressors so that they kick out of old, devastating, destructive rhythms and start new ways of approaching each other in very tiny ways. And as they practice that, they make their marriage safer and safer and safer. Then, that's not the end of it. The next step then is that by making it safer, it allows them then to challenge each other to ask for more.
It sounds like that's your kind of premise, but not what they're coming in saying, hey, change my neurons.
No.
Okay. The styles of a marriage therapist. I'm sure there's all kinds of styles, but if you're a great therapist for individuals, Does that skill transfer to being a great couples counselor?
No, not at all, actually. Couples counseling is very different in that you're dealing with two people at once, obviously, which means you're dealing with thousands of pieces of input, histories, family cultures. When you think about it, couples are really creating a new culture out of two very divergent cultures. A therapist, I think the thing that draws me to it is that I'm more interested in systems and how people interact than individual psychopathology. And so to me it's much more interesting to see how do these things kind of affect each other and create traditions, rituals, etc. that don't work.
But the individual therapist who says, I hear your pain and let's look at options,
right,
and might be supportive and not real active.
Right.
How does that compare to a style that is effective?
Yeah, I think couples therapists are very active, and that is typically when you hear complaints about couples therapists from people that have visited them. There's a couple. One is he was too laid back, or she was too laid back. She didn't give us any direction or input. She listened to us, but that didn't really help. You hear statements like they kept telling us to go out and have more fun together, which it can just be absolutely destructive to a couple.
Why?
Oh, it's the funny thing about that is it sounds kind of romantic and cool, like, well, spend more time together. But if a couple's really battling with each other, if you're battling and you go to a therapist and they say, just spend more time together, you might want to just politely thank them and leave and find a therapist. The problem with that is twofold. First of all, it doesn't work because when you go out and you have this romantic candlelit dinner and you're gazing into each other's eyes, your heart rates actually go up because you're making direct eye contact. And you're under this expectation that you're supposed to be doing well now. But you've got all this tension built up. So by the time you get through dinner, if you make it that far, by the time you get to the parking lot of the restaurant, you're usually in a fight. The worst part of that is now you've done what the therapist told you to do, and you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Because that therapist should know what they're talking about. So if you can't even do this, you must have a horrible marriage. Okay.
My
which
hunch
is really
is
devastating.
I would have a hunch that you start where the heat is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. My sense is what you're trying to do with couples is not solve all their problems. You're not trying to go problem by problem, week by week. You're trying to get them to create a new style in which they help each other lower their heart rates.
Yeah.
There's statistics that suggest from John Gottman that the best...
Why don't you explain who John Gottman is?
John Gottman is really the foremost researcher on couples in the country, maybe in the world, probably in the world. Okay. And he's talked about the fact that biologically the best measure that two people are not going to be able to speak to each other, not be able to take in new data, etc., is a heart rate of over 100 beats per minute. And so a primary goal, if you're trying to get people to connect and feel safe with each other, is really a physiological one. It's lower the heart rate, calm yourself, and reconnect from a centered state of feeling kind of like you're in charge of your own body.
Let me give you a choice here.
Aroused.
In comes the couple. They're mad at each other. They're usually mad at each other, right? When they come in, they
sometimes,
point. Don't they point the finger? It's his fault. No, it's her fault.
Right. Right.
Okay. If you say, "Oh, let's talk about why you love each other," as a lead-in, versus, "Okay, you tell me your abuse and you tell me your abuse," of those two, which is more productive?
I would usually tend to listen to their beefs first. To leap forward to why you love each other may be too much. It's that Swahili thing, like you want me to say all this really nice stuff, and I'm really angry at this person. And the danger there is that they may actually say something that's hard to take back, and now they've said it in front of a witness. In other words, they may have to go really negative and say something like, well, I don't even know why we're together, or something that's really devastating that you're going to have to keep working back from. And I believe that's counterproductive.
And beefs are less likely to...
Right.
When they come out to do that, they already know the beefs, right?
Yeah, their actual beefs are not going to be all that helpful. They're not, because solving each one of those is not going to fix their marriage. But they need to feel like you're listening to them before you go leaping into closeness and romance.
Okay, well, why don't we get to Gottman research and what is proven to be the effective and then the ineffective techniques in couples counseling?
Where you see most of the work that I consider effective and is getting the best research background is this sense of paying attention to the body and what we call attachment, that sense of how people feel connected to each other and what gets in the way of that. So you have Susan Johnson, who's talks about therapy that really focuses on bringing up emotions in people, but in a way that also connects them and makes them feel like they're relating to each other at a higher level, at a deeper level. And she pays attention to kind of the biology of attachment, what keeps people what gets people very aroused, and then what shuts them down or makes them pull away from each other. And that includes their family history, that includes their biology, that includes whether they've been through surgery recently, they're stressed out at work, numerous.
Well, how do you know this? Because you don't have a strap on their arm telling you what's going on with their heartbeat and so on?
No, you just ask them. Well, in some research, they actually do put that strap on, but you ask them. You ask them about their history. You look at where the tensions have come up. I do a very complete history of their marriage, the pros and the cons. When have they felt most successful? When have they ran into trouble? What are their supports? Are their families seen as supports, or do their families create tension? So you get a lot of history before you proceed with this.
I'm still not clear what you're doing, though. I'm hearing you say, "Hey, watch the physiology. If it's really revved up, you got a problem." But how do you fix it?
You fix it by giving them. You offer them means of helping each other understand that physiology, first of all, and that it's not cruelty. It's not meant to get up, and I will actually say I have not met people that get up in the morning thinking of how to mess with their partner. You humanize it a bit, first of all, so that they feel like you use different language based on the client, but I sometimes say, you guys are involved in a bad contract. You've formed a bad contract. Contracts are meant to be rewritten. Then you develop ways. I ask couples to have business meetings, and this is why I say some people find this almost too mechanical. The reason for business meetings is they have to have a time limit. 30 minutes is about as long as humans can concentrate well.
Okay.
And so that time limit is useful. Couples typically don't trust each other. So one partner says, I need to talk to you for 5 minutes. And the other partner goes, oh my God, it's never been 5 minutes. It's 4 hours, and then you don't speak to me for 2 weeks because you're mad at me. Why would I sign on for that? So a 30-minute limit, most people know that they can stand anything for 30 minutes. I figured this out in the Army, that I could put up with almost anything if I knew there was a time limit. I could do something different. And I've kind of converted that into my treatment, where I believe that people, if they know there's a limit, a time limit, and there's rules, that they know that they are not going to be yelled at, they're not going to be told that they're stupid, that there are rules within that 30-minute session, they have a greater chance of operating from their higher brain.
Okay, let's go back and deal with a specific case and see how this applies.
Sure.
And I'm assuming this is not an unusual case. In comes a heterosexual couple with the woman saying, this guy doesn't talk to me. He's like a clam. And when we were dating, he was full of life, but now he just gets in front of the TV. I say, what's wrong? And he grunts. And I feel lonely in this marriage. And the guy says, I'm fine. Now, how do you apply these techniques to help this couple?
Okay. I would ask a lot of questions, first of all, about what constitutes fine. Because generally when men answer, or when couples answer in a very brief tone, things are just fine. What they're really saying is that it's completely overwhelming to think about making this better. So I might ask him, do you ever picture a better relationship with her? And often they will say, well, yeah, I wish we did more things together, but it
wouldn't she say
so
if you
well.
just stopped complaining, things would be fine?
He might, but I would ask him if that would still solve the problem in terms of, does he really feel like she's on his side? Has he seen that look of appreciation, desire in her eye recently? Because most of us need that. When men ask, I just need to have more sex and then I'll be fine. Often I think what they really need more than physical sexual release is they need that sense that their partner appreciates, enjoys them, is glad to see them when they walk in the door. Okay. Now, if this couple's pattern that you're describing is one in which he walks in the door and she actually is too busy for him, and with dealing with the kids and dinner and all that other stuff. And then he says, well, here's what happened at my day, and she doesn't look terribly interested because he hasn't been paying attention to her for quite a while. And they've developed this rhythm. I believe that that gentleman will still want something more out of this relationship than what he's got, but he'll tell himself, this is about as good as it gets.
Well, I want to get at the technique, so people who are getting marriage counseling are have an idea what's a good technique and what's not a good technique. So what I'm hearing is you pay attention to the physiological, but what is it you're doing as a couples counselor?
You're asking them then to reconnect through meetings, through giving each other brief bits of data. Now again, the guy may be saying, oh, she wants me to talk to her for 4 hours about romance. And what she may really be asking for is, I need to know where I stand with you.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example, a more extreme example. I had a couple one time that fought so bitterly that they literally would drive home at night thinking in their cars, not tonight, not tonight, not tonight, I'm not going to do it tonight, I'm not going to do it tonight.
Do
they
what?
Would fight. They would walk into the kitchen, look at each other, and off they would go.
Wow.
They would just, it was so automatic. The responses were so automatic. We tried all kinds of little things. What we eventually did was they put a chalkboard in their kitchen. They were not allowed to speak to each other until they wrote on the chalkboard something. And one time, I remember one of his was he wrote on the chalkboard, very angry, not you, not now.
Wow.
Basically 6 words. But a massive amount of information. If I trust you that it'll be okay, and you trust me that I care, and you tell me, very angry, not me, nothing I can do about it right now, you're not looking for anything from me right now, I can go read the paper. I can go chill out. I trust you to tell me if it's different. That takes a lot of practice to reach that level of trust. What I find is that couples are so hyper alert to each other that they're always trying to help each other. They're always trying to fix each other, but they're guessing. And the more they guess, the more divergent they become.
Well, I'm kind of hearing underneath this is, how can you facilitate the couples really getting to know each other better?
Yes. Yes. But in small fragments. They have to, in a way, they have to practice this sense that they can do this in small fragments, and kind of reconnect and learn more about each other in ways that actually feel like they're partnering again. This is the other issue. When you're stressed out in your marriage, your brain tends to go to black and white.
Right.
So we either have massive amounts of sex and we enjoy each other tremendously, or we divorce.
Right.
The idea of dropping back to where they rethink their partnering and how they treat each other as business partners running a family, and then moving up to friendship, and then up to intimacy, can feel like we're talking about a 10-year plan. But in fact, once you break through that wall of repartnering, marriage therapy is about done, frankly. They're about ready to go on their own. Once they've gotten through that brick wall of feeling like they're close enough to partner well and can start playing with each other again and being a little playful.
And to get past that brick wall, what have they achieved to get there?
They break down, first of all, they break down the ill treatment where they tweak each other. And one of the things about these meetings is that they're paying more attention to their own gut than to their partner in some ways. That they're actually observing for, when do I start feeling aroused? When do I start looking at the clock wishing the 30 minutes was over? When do I start feeling stressed? And what are the parameters to that? And is there a way that I can help my partner help me slow that down?
Let's say a couple comes in and first session you say, I'd like each of you to write down, without talking to the other, how you'd like your partner to change to be the world's best partner. Mm-hmm. And then after they write it down, you say, well, this is silly, but let's share it. We know this is unrealistic, but let's share it. Would that be a useful technique?
I think it could be useful. I probably wouldn't do it in the first session. I might wait, again, with that idea that you might get, depending on the rage that the couple's experiencing, you may get some pretty bitter comments there. Or again, things that they couldn't take back.
Or you might say, let's do it operationally. I don't want any dirty name-calling, just specifically. Okay. One other question about technique. Let's say you call out the couple. You say, gee, Barb, when you look at John with that kind of twisted say something nice, but your face looks angry. That really gets them. That's good. How did you learn to get them without getting them? And John, when you just clam up and say, I don't have anything to say when you do, that gets her, but she can't blame you. You guys are really good, but do you want to continue that? Or something? Would that be a good or bad technique?
I think that's a useful technique.
Okay.
It depends on the couple. Again, I believe you're always working towards matching a little bit your language to the couple. Because one couple might feel like, oh, yeah, you got me there. Oh, yeah, I do that. Another couple might feel very offended or attacked. But
wouldn't they then perhaps see you as the enemy, and that would help them?
It could. It really could.
Yeah.
There's some other things that don't work. And one of those things would be this idea of reciprocity. This got a lot of talk in the 60s and 70s. They call it the quid pro quo approach, which dictates that if couples feel like they're getting as much as they're giving, partners feel like they're getting as much as they're giving, they will stay together and have a happy marriage. The research doesn't support it. And logically, if you think about it, when people are counting coup on each other, when they're kind of assessing, am I getting 50% here, they're already in trouble.
You know, we could go on a long time with this. But couple closing questions. How do you know you've got the wrong couples counselor?
I think if a counselor is not listening to you, that it's not working, for one thing. When a counselor becomes defensive about their technique, when you tell them that it's not helping, you've got the wrong counselor.
By not listening, it's like going through their rote method they use.
Yeah,
with
they've got their
kind of
style, and the couple's saying, look, it's not helping, we're in trouble here. The counselor needs to have a really in-depth discussion. They may still want to stick with their style, but they may want to alter it, or they may want to explore with the couple what's not working and what is. Whereas if they just put the brakes on, I think the main thing you want to ask your therapist is, do they do marriage counseling, and do they have training for it? There is some research suggests that like 86% of therapists out there say they do marriage counseling, and approximately 16% actually have training in doing marriage counseling in a systems approach to working with pairs or groups. And you really want somebody that is very experienced, I think, with working with pairs and thinking in a couple's way.
By the way, does it work? Do couples get better?
It actually works very well. There's actually a compendium, the January issue of the Journal of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy did a overview meta-analysis of couples research, family research, and it's actually very effective. In what they did in that journal, it's a huge journal, but what they did was they broke it down and talked about specific syndromes or kinds of things where couples therapy or marriage therapy or family therapy are specifically very helpful. But the overarching research over the years has been that marriage therapy actually works.
What does it work best on, and more does it hardly work?
I think it has tremendous advantages in most areas. There's evidence that 86% of people, for example, where there's been an affair, if they actually work together, they stay together and, in fact, talk about having an improved relationship. Alcohol and drug abuse, it works, although treatment usually has to occur first. In significant acting out sexual issues, often there has to be individual treatment before couples therapy is most effective. Sometimes if it's child abuse or something, there's some evidence that jurisprudence kinds of interventions need to occur first before counseling. So there are steps to it. If somebody's actively drinking and it's contributing to marital fights, I generally won't see them until they've been through treatment.
How about if they've waited 10 years? I mean, doesn't it, from what you said earlier in the interview, I would think the earlier you come in, the more likely it is to be effective? The
longer it is, the worse the prognosis. And also when people say, well, we've fought since the day we were together, or this has been going on since the day we got together, that's not a great prognosis. What I try to be is really clear with people, not to shine them on or make them think it's going to work if it's not working. But I want to do a good evaluation. I want to spend some time with them to see, is there something, why are you even seeing me? If it's this bad, what's the glue? What's keeping you together at this point? And to see if that sounds valid, if that's something we can work on.
And what is a winning outcome?
To me, this is there's several levels of this. Couples will often think of a winning outcome as some big romantic movie kind of ending event. My sense is the winning goes along the way in small variants, such as when couples come in and say, we didn't do much different this week, but we had this big argument, and this time it only took us like 15 minutes or a half hour to shut it down. Or we had this big discussion that a month ago would have sent us into a tizzy, and we actually listened to each other for 10 minutes longer than we would have before. These tiny little increments of change, to me, those are the champagne moments.
How about if a couple splits? Do you ever think to yourself, thank goodness?
I've had a few of those, not too many. I've had one couple that really came in, well, I shouldn't say one couple, but one couple comes to mind that came in initially to talk about repairing the marriage. And I realized very early on that they had completely different ideas of what that meant. And they began to talk about the fact that they were after something completely different in life. And we actually worked towards divorce. And they did an exceptional job.
So that was a good outcome.
Yes.
Well, this is a good outcome to chat with you and learn more about marriage counseling. And I thank you very much.
Thanks for having me here.
And I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights.